Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Losers Lunch, our weekly exploration, not expiration, of and in excellence. It's our 50th episode. So when you consider that we do one every week, although I think we missed 1 week, that means that we're almost turning one, which is pretty neat. I think we actually already turned one. If I remember, our first episode was in August, so maybe we missed 2 of them. Anyway, let's talk about the market here real quick. Sorry to disappoint those of you that like the guitar. No guitar this week. There's a lot to talk about. We have a pretty interesting guest. If he makes it on time, if he makes it, oh, there he is. On cue. What's up, buddy?
What's up? How are you?
Doing great, doing great. I was just starting to talk about the market, so I'll give you some time to gather yourself here while I talk about what we are going to expect this week. So tomorrow, we've got a bunch of Case-Shiller stuff. That's housing. We know that. Consumer confidence as well. Wednesday, mortgage apps, Chicago PMI. Thursday's the big day, challenger layoffs, which don't get a lot of press. I like them because it's a forebearer of things to come. A lot of times you hear about layoffs and then they don't hit until months later. ADP is supposed to come out at 8:15. It's been 3 months since we've had an ADP report. We'll see that. It's normally on Wednesdays, by the way. ISM, jobless claims, and then Friday's non-farm payroll. Should be an interesting week, unless you've been under a rock. Jerome Powell opened his mouth on Friday in Jackson Hole, so scheduled interview and meeting there. That's a sort of their annual meeting out there. And the market absolutely hated it. Stocks were down like 4%. We're down again today. Bonds didn't love it. And it's because of what he said. He said, well, one report doesn't mean anything, and we're going to remain vigilant. Do you have an opportunity to check out any of what he said on Friday, TJ?
I caught it a little bit. I'm actually on vacation with my family. That's why we have very little Wi-Fi at the house we rented. So I'm actually at the library using the Wi-Fi in the parking lot.
Where are you?
I'm on Block Island.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, I caught it and I saw what it did, and was mortgage-backed security bonds are down 50 basis points again today. He's not really helping anything. I think. What and again, this is my opinion, but let's just call it what it is, and it's a recession. And the sooner we recognize that we have a problem, the faster we can treat it, like almost anything,
Dude, so I actually saw it, and I give him a shout out if I remember who published this content this weekend, but I saw a little blip. It was on CNBC. So it was one of the CNBC guys, one of the lesser known CNBC guys. And the guy sort of did like this crude video of the screen. And what he said was that he's trapped, that Powell couldn't say what he really wanted to say maybe, or needed to say, or what we expected him to say, which is, hey, to your point, we're in a recession.
Yep.
That is getting worse. See, that's my big thing, TJ, is I keep saying we aren't supposed to be in a recession yet. Nobody thought Q1 was going to be bad. Q2 was slightly better. If anything, the data has been printing worse since July 1st. I think we're going to print 3 straight quarters of negative growth. So even though we're trying to redefine recession, boy, we'll really be in it if Q3 is negative. But what they're saying is he can't come out and say it, because if he does, the market's going to trade. If he says, guys, we're in a recession, we're going to keep tightening, but we don't really have to, and Maybe this month is only going to be a quarter. What they're saying is, well, the Dow's going to rally 2,000 points. Bonds are going to go to 2.25. Now what? And the Fed doesn't want that, because if they start easing too soon, then they might not be able to mitigate inflation. I have something to say about that as well. But I mean, look, you're knee deep in it as I am. We're also, like pretty regular guys. I mean, dare I say, I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at it. I'm seeing that things are getting bad in many different sectors of our economy. Do you have those sorts of conversations up by you, and are you seeing it? So I'm all the way down here. You're all the way up there, about 800 miles apart.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm in New England, and I'll just say, in Rhode Island, where I am right now, there, Block Island, it's small. It's like 10 miles, right? It's a small island, not a lot of development, not a lot of people. But the grocery store, there's one grocery store, and a thing of ice cream was $10. So people are really feeling pain at the grocery store, where they, and it's not just ice cream or things that you treat yourself. It's staples, bread, milk, all the things that people buy, on a daily basis. They're all higher, and I think the recession and that again. They're not really in, and inflation, and some of it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have a lot of cheap money still on the street, and so even if supply chain gets better, companies aren't really, no corporation set out to make less money, so they're gonna keep their prices high as long as they can. To make as much money as they possibly can. As we get through earnings season, a lot of these companies have had the highest profit margins that they've ever had. So at a certain point, if no one takes the reins, it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I heard this story. It was, true or otherwise, it was interesting and tells the tale. Guy owns a hot dog stand. Starts a pretty successful business, successful enough that he keeps adding and adding and adding to the point where he has like 40 establishments throughout the state or whatever. And his child goes to Harvard, comes back and says, hey, Dad, what are you doing with all these businesses? We're in a recession and business is booming. Okay. And all of a sudden, he's like, wow, we're in a recession, starts buying slightly cheaper hot dogs, starts buying slightly cheaper buns, puts a couple less fries on the plate. One business closes, another business closes. The next thing you know, he's down to one remaining business, and he looks at his son and he says, you're right, we are in a recession.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've reckoned now for 30 years. When folks ask me and I say, hey, rates are never going up, right? Or what we used to call lower for longer, right? It's really that. Information and automation are price and wage killers, period. To figure out, now I would have never known that ice cream was $10 where you are, right? Without the internet. And I mean, I guess we could have spoken to each other on the phone, but without a telephone. Okay. I mean, like the telephone was sort of the first internet. Hey, what's going on up there? I don't know. Weather's great. How about down there? It's coldest winter we've ever had. Boy, it might be cold by me. I'm going to go out and buy a jacket, or I'm going to stay in. That's how this stuff sort of starts, and we sort of call it FOMO, and FOMO works nowadays, and it works on both sides. I mean, it took us a little bit of while after COVID, after some of this stimulus, for things to really heat up. I keep saying if we're going to raise rates, we should have done it last summer. And if we're going to lower rates, we're going to probably lower rates next summer, and we should have done it this summer. The thing that I keep coming back to, and I posted this on Friday on my Market Minute about how the Fed is massively offsides. And I'm with you. The price of certain things is still high. So sort of how do you combat so-called inflation is with high interest rates. The problem is interest rates are not what borrowing, frothiness is not really what's driving these prices. I know there are those that would argue demand pull inflation. I still argue against that in that the demand for 50% of the product isn't true demand. And so noticing the price of things, and look, and you're in a resort community, you're on vacation, things are going to be a little bit more.
Right.
But at the end of the day, here's a good question. How much of that ice cream was on the shelf?
Well, I mean, there was not a, there was no shortage of ice cream on the shelf.
So think about this for a second. Go back a year when prices were low and there was nothing on the shelf. That's what drove prices up.
Right.
Now they can't sell it at that price.
Right.
So who cares what the price is if nobody's buying it? Now, I'm not suggesting that that's a fact, but just that, anecdotally.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just kind of reset everything, and like any other, I don't want to say commodity, but any other thing that any other market, you're gonna keep lowering the ice cream prices till someone finally buys some. It's actually probably cheaper to buy 15 ice cream cones at an ice cream, shop than it is to buy a half gallon of ice cream in the grocery store right now, which is not really how it usually works.
What's interesting about that, there's one of the things that CPI as a measure of inflation doesn't do well is take into account what's called replacement. It's exactly what you're talking about. And I've used the example of chicken and beef. If the price of beef goes up 10x and people stop eating beef and only eat chicken, and the price of chicken is halved, then do we really have inflation? And so what's interesting about it is I have closely followed the price of luxury watches and cars throughout this pandemic.
I know that watches are going down. Yeah, for sure.
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively.
I mean, secondary market, you could buy like a Patek or you could buy a Rolex. And, with a Patek, you could get 300% on your money if you could buy it, from a authorized dealer at retail. And Rolex is the same thing. I mean, it's a little bit less of a markup, but you could get 30% guaranteed on your money. And now I see them finally selling, for less than, what they were on the, I'm talking about used, the
Correct.
Secondary market versus, the retail, I think is set pretty much, in stone. But the secondary market, I see that going down quite a bit.
Yeah, you want to talk about something ridiculous, and then we'll move on, talk more about business. Generally not a watch that is available to the majority of us, but you look at some of these Richard Mille watches. Just saw some guy's been producing some content on Instagram. How to watch. First things first, I think the watch retails only for like 180 grand or something like that. Went up to $1 million as recently as 2.5, 3 months ago.
Right.
And it's down to like 410,000 today. So first things first, for those of you that are watching or will watch on replay that aren't into luxury watches or can't afford $1 million Richard Mille, that's how crazy things absolutely got. But to the preponderance of the 350 million people that live in America, I mean, who cares what a Richard Mille $1 million watch really costs? But just the idea that it had gone up almost 10x, call it 8x, and now it's almost a third of what it was going for, and that's just happened in the last 2 months, gives you an idea of really how quickly the market has turned.
Right, and I think the luxury market is something that is the first to really see the pain in any kind of downturn and economic downturn.
100%. And somebody just recently brought up here, and I've used this example again many times, the Millennium Mall here in Orlando. the line outside the Gucci store would be 300, 400, 500 people deep. I mean, he'd be out the mall door. Now you walk by, there's nobody in there. I mean, these things are good indicators.
Right.
One of the things that was interesting, we literally have a borrower who's 60 days late on their mortgage, hasn't gotten a commission check for 6 months. So that's scary. One is due in September. And they answered our call on vacation.
Huh.
So think about that, folks. They haven't made their mortgage payment. And I bring this up for a few different reasons. They haven't made their mortgage payment, yet they're on vacation. But why are they on vacation? Well, they probably planned and paid for that vacation 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago. Okay. So this is where, figures lie and liars can figure is like, this data lags at times and they're being accretive to the economy right now when in reality, they're in really bad shape.
Yeah, I'd agree. Funny a story about Richard Mille. And I don't know if this is true, but I heard that when he started making watches, he was going to sell them for $25,000, and he took out or either 12,500, something like that. A pretty good number. And he took out an ad, I think in Robb Report or high-end magazine, and they made a typo and they added a zero. So instead of 25,000, it was 250,000. And the first run sold out immediately. So he kept the cost the same.
That is, I had not heard that story. That is insane.
Yeah.
That speaks to folks, and this has been a common theme on prior episodes, is the difference between price and value. And when somebody objects to your price, it's more than likely because you're not delivering value.
Right. And, in something like that, especially in a luxury market, it really is what someone is willing to pay. Think about art, the art market. It really is. I mean, is a maybe Da Vinci painting worth 500 million or whatever it went for? Is it, it's not really even that nice. I don't think it's that interesting a painting, but it's whatever someone's willing to pay for it.
It's it is so true. So, what are you doing in this market? What are things that you're doing to drive value? I love the content. I constantly liking your stuff on LinkedIn. Now, your LinkedIn content is generally different than your Instagram content, though.
It is, and it's by design. So the LinkedIn content is typically a little bit more buttoned up. Instagram is really kind of, you get a little bit of a view into a little bit of my personality, but it's also curated as well. I mean, everyone's social media content is curated these days. As far as what I'm doing, I mean, I think it's slower across the board. So what I'm doing is really kind of examining what I'm doing well and what I'm doing poorly, and then either improving what I'm doing poorly or delegating it. Right. So I'm starting to incorporate automation in my follow-up because that was something that I saw was a weakness. I actually did a beta test of an automated follow-up system that a colleague of mine at Semper created, and it was old leads. So I just put the old leads through the follow-up system, and there were 12 touches on it. And out of, I think, 60 leads, 10 or 12 people said they bought a house, and it wasn't with me. So there's clearly some chinks in the armor there where I can do some improving, and also kind of doubling down on relationships and making sure that I'm leading with value. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people are talk about social media, and a lot of people can be good at that, but it really is the boots on the ground, belly to belly meetings, and really looking at what your real estate partners do well or don't do well, and then bridging that gap and kind of being the supplement to what they need to get their business to the next level, or whatever level they're at to level up. And I don't think a lot of partners in my space look at that. My space is also a former social media platform, but we're not talking about that.
You wouldn't want to be a partner in that MySpace.
No, you know what? I think Justin Timberlake owns that now, but you wouldn't want to be a partner in that. But just figuring out what people, because it's slow across the board. And it's really a double whammy because there's more of us now than there ever were. And I say us, I mean people in the real estate industry. There's more of us now than there ever were. So a lot of people should be examining basically their fundamentals and seeing what they can improve and maybe what they can double down on. And what I would say is look at the things you do well and do more of that. And the things that you don't do well, first of all, recognize that you don't do everything well, and then delegate or automate what you don't do well.
I love that. To sort of dovetail that into a conversation we had this morning on our executive call, we're just talking about social media in general and our initiative. And I said, and so then we talk about, wins, what for the weekend or whatever. I said, I had like the ultimate of all wins is because we're always talking about work-life balance and all this other stuff. So Saturday morning, I posted some content with someone that we've done business with, Doug Dvorak at Dumont Jets. We've had business with him on a bunch of different levels, and we're playing golf together, right? So it was this mix of business, life, social media. I got something like 10,000 views in an hour on that thing. Okay.
And that was on what platform did you get all those views?
On Instagram.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really good.
And it was sort of like, okay, and I keep talking about this. How do we use technology to empower us as humans, not replace us? Right. And now you turn around and you say, okay, what are the things I do well, don't do well? What do people need to know about me? How can I produce content? What sort of business can I generate from my content? Once I generate traffic and eyeballs and prospects from my content, how do I monetize it? And I've referenced this a bunch of times. Tom Mancuso, no relation, who's been on the program before, posted this thing on Facebook. 85% of sales are made on the fifth phone call, and we only make the fifth phone call 10% of the time.
Yeah.
And so when you circle back and found out, holy cow, this is, 5 or 6 pieces of business that I missed on.
Yeah.
I think we owe it to ourselves to figure out why. Why did you miss it? Were you always going to miss out on it? Or is it because one more phone call would have gotten you an extra one, and then 2 would have gotten you a second one, and then 5 would have gotten you them all? Or maybe you didn't do a good job of making that phone call at the point of decision or creating value. Those lessons to learn from both why you got the business where you did and didn't get the business where you didn't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think it's great analysis, and I think everyone should look at that. And I think personally, for me, when I did a deep dive, I found that you need to meet the customer where they're at. So what I mean by that is a lot of people don't even want to use the phone anymore. They want to talk by text. Some people are email people. Some people, I just use Facebook Messenger to talk to. So you have to meet people on their level. I'm more comfortable talking on the phone because a lot of times we're talking about complicated concepts or we talk about money. There's a lot of different choices you have and to go into the pros and cons of them. But what I've done instead is, I'm using Mortgage Coach to show people, illustrate the pros and cons of the different programs, and then just communicating the way they're most comfortable, whether that's text or social media, DMs or however it is. And asking up front, I think helps build trust and, a level of comfort with your client rather than just, saying we need to talk on the phone. Some people are just so adverse to talking on the phone, they'd rather deal with someone else than talk to you.
Boy, by the way, there's a couple other things I want to touch on here, but before we do that, that is a great point. Is understanding and observing and kind of going with the flow. I've told this story before, but at the expense of being redundant, I'd love to, because it's perfect in this regard. One of the best loan officers I've ever had that I've had the pleasure of working with, a long time ago, early 90s. He worked in a call center I had. His name was Chet Dombrowski. And all of a sudden, I hear Chet, and, he starts screaming, yeah, I am going to save you that much fucking money. And I go running over there, and I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, he puts him on hold. I got some guy, some Philly boy, and he's yelling at, and I would hear Chet. It's like sort of like a Seinfeld episode. Slow talk, fast talk, low talk, and he would always say, yeah, she was a fast talker. He was a slow talker.
Yeah.
And understanding what's my cadence, what's my preferred method of communication. That is a really effective tool as a salesperson. I always used to say, look, would I sell cash out, big picture, maybe even using cash out to buy a second home to an engineer, right? Or by the same token, when I had an engineer on the phone, I'd calculate the payment to the penny. That's how their brain is wired.
Right.
If I got another salesperson on the other end of the phone, I'm like, hey, let's take some cash out, buy a second home, an investment property, big picture. Yeah. Understanding how people are wired, a very, very effective tool in connecting with someone in a selling situation or even a social or a business situation.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't have all our customers take disc assessments, right?
That I'm sort of old school on some things, and that's something that we've been doing in Clifton's and whatnot. But you know what? It's a really powerful tool, because if you know somebody's weaknesses are X, Y, and Z, and they continually fail in that regard, our immediate reaction is to be resentful, get rid of them or whatever. When the reality is, if you were a good leader, you'd recognize, well, that's their weakness, and I've got to either live with it, endeavor to improve it, sort of, a little bit of both. We are who we are. Yeah.
I think leaders who lead up rather than leaders who bring people up are the kind of people who ignore that and blame people for their shortcomings, where they should have been coached up to double down on their strengths. And that's what I believe, at least.
I love it. Let's go back to content a little bit.
Sure.
Because I'm curious. I'm going to ask a question as to why you're not doing it. And if you are, I apologize, because I haven't seen it. But so I'll intro this with a funny story. So TJ and I met in Augusta at the Masters, and boy, he was super generous. He rolls up with a whole bunch of wine and bourbon. Okay. And the wine, he brought it was more than 2 bottles, but 2 labels, I should say, really, really good wine. And then he leaves it in his trunk, so it gets totally cooked, okay, which you never can do with wine.
No.
You can't.
Yeah.
Although it was in there for a short enough period of time where it didn't ruin.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. I love one of my favorite lines of the trip was he says to me, hey, how'd you like the wine? And I said, well, it burned my mouth because it was so hot from the trunk, but it was delicious. And it was delicious, by the way. Oh. But bourbon. He brings like 12 bottles of bourbon. He's like a bourbon connoisseur. Yeah. And he can tell you, drink this with this, and this tastes this, and do this. Why don't you produce? So let's talk a little bit about bourbon.
Sure.
And why don't you produce content around bourbon?
to be honest with you, I'm a little bored. Well, I guess not bored with it. It's I found, and I'll tell a short story to kind of illustrate this. I find that you become who you are, right? When I was younger, in my early 30s, I was doing stand-up comedy and doing some theater, and so I was posting a lot of that stuff on social media. And a friend of mine bought a house. I said, I was at his new house. I said, how come you didn't reach out to me to do the mortgage? And he goes, well, I thought you were a stand-up comedian. So you become what you are. People have a very difficult time putting people in multiple buckets because they're busy with their own lives. So if I become a bourbon expert on social media, it's really not going to do anything for my mortgage career. I might get some interesting feedback, and I have before, because at one point I had an Instagram page that was just specifically dedicated to bourbon and poker and golf, and I kind of did away with it. It still exists, but I don't really go on it anymore. But it was interesting because I met some people and I got to try a lot of great bourbon and got invited to some cool poker games, but it didn't really help me in my actual career. And I don't have the bandwidth or really the interest in being multiple things to multiple people. Think about when Taylor Swift started doing pop music and people wanted her to be a country star, and they couldn't, in their head, they couldn't, keep it together that she could be both, right? She had to be in one bucket or the other. I feel like that's true for most people in their persona or what they're putting on social media. It's very difficult for people who are not in your life to put you in multiple buckets.
So let's talk about this for a second, right?
Sure. Yeah.
From a business, a tactical standpoint, here's some feedback that I'd want to throw at you in that regard.
Sure.
I can't argue anything you just said. So let's be clear about that. One question that I think we need to ask ourselves when we engage in content is, what is our desired outcome? So, for example, what if I were to say to you, and this is a hypothetical, TJ, what your business needs the most is for people to get to know TJ, not what TJ knows. Then in that particular case, if that were the desired outcome, then doing poker and bourbon content is what you need, not mortgage content, right?
Sure.
So I think that the content that we produce arguably should start with what's our desired outcome. I think that's where
I would agree with that.
Folks lose their way.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said, I think that's where some folks might lose their way, is that they don't know what they want out of it.
I agree. I agree. And to be perfectly honest with you, I am revamping my social media where there's going to be more information capture, I should say. So more interaction as far as that. And I think if I'm able to capture on the back end more information about the people who are following me, then I think I can expand in breadth the amount, the difference in content too, because then it pulls other people in, right? And if you're doing niche marketing, which this really is, you can explore those different niches. Up until this point, I haven't really been very good about data capture or just kind of, what I mean by that is getting people's information, engaging their interest in real estate. I've really just been doing it kind of almost as a like a 10-year long beta test to see what kind of gets engagement, what doesn't, and always been meaning to do it. But we're taking the steps now to have some stuff on the back end where people can put their information on, and then they'll start on a drip campaign and really kind of get that. So I think it's a great idea. I think what you bring up is actually great, because I do have weird niche interests. Like I collect records. I'm interested in bourbon. I am interested in wine, not as much as you are, in poker and in golf and all these things that I have these niche interests in. And I think there's other people out there with the same interests.
I got to tell you something. I want to challenge you on this. I think it's a huge miss, and here's why. I got to know TJ the person.
Right.
And I think that TJ the person is far more compelling than TJ the mortgage guy, right?
Sure.
And I think everyone would agree. And when you talk about that stuff, and I've been on this campaign of it's called home ownership, not house ownership. And so here's what I want you to think about as a takeaway. How do I get some bourbon content? How do I get some poker content, some golf content, some wine content, some record content around the mortgage business?
Yeah.
With a realtor, with a builder, with other mortgage people, with people within your organization, just hanging around for a 5-minute clip, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a 1-minute reel, a series of 5 1-minute reels where you're sitting around smoking a cigar, drinking a bourbon on a pool deck, rather on a back deck.
Yeah.
That this builder just built for $12,000, and I can build you one for $12,000, and we could put it in a 203K. That to me,
that's
is
great.
The beauty of what we do in this business.
Yeah, you. I think you literally just changed my life. I think you just changed my life for the good. So
thank you, Jen. Yes, they've expanded reels. I heard it. I'm in on it. I want a little piece of that action.
All right.
But yet, this is what I keep saying is the example I use. And again, if I've told this story before, I apologize for being redundant. Back in like 14, 15 maybe, we started shopping for a pool. We're going to put a pool in the backyard, okay? And the pool, this will really tie a bow in on this episode, and then I'll give you the last word, because this is going to touch all the high notes about follow-up, about making a connection, about all this stuff. So first place we went to go see, we're kind of in this showroom. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then this salesman did something absolutely genius. He's like, there's nothing like a summer day, the family's around the pool, you sort of get out, you're soaking wet, the grill is scorching hot, and you're flipping burgers, in the hot sun, hot grill, soaking wet. And the smell of the burgers, like he just so captured and encapsulated that iconic summer moment, music in the background, the smell of the barbecue, and the feeling of the heat coming off the barbecue, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, that's why people put in a pool. And that stuck with me. Good.
I think he does a great job of selling with story. I think people buy stories. They don't buy, especially like a pool is not like a sound financial decision. It's a decision that you make with your heart more than your head. And a story is going to sell that better than an itemized, receipt or bill,
100%. And so he succeeded, exponentially, parabolically in telling that story. And then I bought the pool from a different place because he didn't follow up. He didn't follow through. He didn't really work with us to sort of get to the core of the apple.
Yeah.
And that's where, you have to, in our business, in our industry, I think you've got to, paint the picture, but be fundamentally sound from a business perspective, follow up, follow through. At the end of the day, it's not easy, but I argue so I'm going to be 51 in December. Okay. I forgot how old you are.
I'm 48.
48. So you're talking to two old, we're two old timers here.
Right.
And we're talking about social media.
Yeah. Yeah. At least we're not talking about Facebook, which is good because that's where all the old people are. We're not that old.
Well, you know what? I got a pretty big following on Facebook now. A lot of mortgage brokers love Facebook. I was surprised to hear that. So now I am on Facebook quite a bit, but Instagram is really my preferred mode.
I agree. I think Facebook is a wider range of people, and I think that's why people like it. Also, you seem to get more feedback and instant feedback from Facebook because there seem to be 8 or 9 people who are always willing to comment on whatever you say. That doesn't necessarily make it good or bad, I think I have like 5,000 Facebook followers or friends, whatever. But the reason I like Instagram and to a lesser extent Twitter is the people who are following you not necessarily to engage with you, but to see what you put up. They're really interested in your content. And I try to honor that as best I can by making my content interesting.
Look, here's the bottom line. I look forward to seeing you produce that content.
Yeah,
because
I'm leaving here with some great ideas. Because I mean, last night I literally was smoking a Cuban cigar, drinking a glass of Weller's bourbon on a deck. So I think I just have to point the camera at myself.
Just point the camera at yourself and bring in some business partners, right? Realtors, builders, what have you.
Yeah.
And let's find out. The world needs more TJ.
I appreciate that.
And I'm here for it. And if you're in the Rhode Island area, what states are you in?
I'm licensed in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Georgia, after going to Augusta, and Florida. I literally was inspired to get licensed in Georgia because of my trip down there this year.
That's awesome. See, look, folks, if you're in any of those states and reach out to TJ because he's interesting both on a professional and personal level.
I appreciate that.
He's competent on both a personal and professional level. And you know what? I find that to be a bit more rare than you might think.
Yeah. Well, I think adversity builds character, and I've had some adversity, so it's helped. I appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate the time. And, if there's anything I can do for you or any of the people tuning in, I'm happy to do it. Even if you want to ask me about bourbon or poker.
Yeah. You could send a bag full of 20 unmarked 20s.
Sure.
Last word. Go ahead.
I would say we're in interesting times in our profession. And rather than wallowing in what is bad, control what you can control and be consistent and look for ways to improve. I think it's really hard for people. It's human nature not to think that you do anything badly, but look in the mirror, and be honest with yourself and say, what do I do well? What do I do badly? Double down on what you do well. And then whatever you do badly, automate or delegate, and just keep on doing what you do and trying to be consistent in this market. I think that's what advice I'd give to anyone in our profession.
I love it. Look in the mirror. Thumbs in, not guns out.
Right.
Everybody, and I love the automate or delegate. I love it. Awesome episode. Thank you for taking 42 minutes and 58 seconds out of your vacation. Go have fun. You've earned it. You deserve it. Next Monday, we're going to probably not do it. It'll either be recorded or we'll do Tuesday because it's Labor Day. Although technically I should be laboring on Labor Day, I guess, and do it. But enjoy the rest of your trip. Look forward to seeing you soon. To everybody who's watching or will be watching, choo-choo.
Thank you.